okay, God's opinion is better, but I can't have an opinion, I can't have...
No. You either believe that you're a slave to God or you're a free man. Which one? You have to decide. You need to submit to God in everything in society, not just in the prayers and the rituals. Islam is not a religion. Islam is a system of life. Political, economical, social, and spiritual. Most of the wars are actually initiated by democracies.
But Iraqi lives and freedom matter greatly to us.
I mean, right now we see a genocide being executed by a democracy. So the whole thing is ideologically biased. So the minute that interest is lost, which is exploiting the rest of the world together, these democracies will start basically killing each other.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim wa bihi nasta'een. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, everybody. How are you doing? Welcome back to another episode of Rewired. And on this show, we talk about big ideas. And today we want to talk about the legislative system that is hegemonic over the world today, which is democracy. It's a word that has a universally positive connotation. Almost every country in the world claims to be a democracy. Even North Korea, whose official name is the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, that's 3 synonyms for democracy right there, claims to be a democracy. Democracy proponents claim that while it may not be perfect, democracy is the best solution to a hard problem, which is the problem of governance, of legislation, of how we want to exist today as a society. So I have with me Sheikh Usta today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And we want to deconstruct this really from an Islamic perspective, but I really want to begin with where democracy is intuitive, which is that it seems logical, Sheikh, that if we all live in a country which has specific laws and policies, that we should all get a say in what those laws and policies are. You know, if they affect me, isn't that my right?
That's a great question. Sadly, that's the part that's not understood about democracy, at least by Muslims. I think by Westerners, it is understood. I would say even today, within the public and popular discourse in the West, it's becoming more about free elections and electing whoever you think is right. But maybe for the purpose of policy too in some cases. But anyway, within the Muslim community, sadly, it's only understood as free elections. And that's not what democracy is all about, which is you're pointing at the real core of the concept, which is legislation and policy making and the say that people should have since we're living together, and we should basically, make laws that take into account everybody's opinion. From an Islamic point of view, we have a different perspective, which is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who should set the law and the policy for us, and we should have no say. And the reason is very simple. If there exists a creator who knows everything about the human being, knows everything about the universe, knows everything about our needs and issues and what optimizes our life and what creates pain and suffering, what creates prosperity and a good life, right? A good quality of life, then why bother basically have a say when you are a limited human being that is biased in a million ways and take your opinion over the perfect opinion? So in Islam, there's no space for legislation for the human being. So that aspect of democracy, which is core to it, doesn't really apply from an Islamic perspective. It gets negated actually fully. The uluhiyyah, the shahada, the kalima, la ilaha illallah, negates the idea or the thought of anyone having the right to legislate, to set rules for society, for the people, other than Allah. So that's the core meaning of kalimat al-tawheed.
Okay, and me as a human being, I cannot make any claim to the fact that it is my right to have a say over the way the country is, because what? Like, okay, God's opinion is better, but I can't have an opinion, I can't have...
No, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran very clearly, وَمَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ وَلَا مُؤْمِنَةٍ إِذَا قَضَى اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَمْرًا أَنْ يَكُونَ لَهُمُ الْخِيَارَةُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِمْ. That it is not for a believing man nor for a believing woman that if Allah and His Messenger have set forth a judgment, that they have any say on that matter.
I think that's a very, just for our viewers, that's a very radically different concept about just humanity and life that we're used to, right? Because if it's between humans making decisions, then surely if a decision affects me, then I should have a say. But this kind of elevates it to no, God is the one that makes the decision.
And that comes from the liberal perspective. The liberal perspective says that you as a human should have a say, an equal say like everybody else. And you should be free to do what you want. When the perspective emanates from freedom, you cannot be free and have no say. It's just literally a contradiction. Similarly, I want to make sure that everybody understands that who's listening to us, that similarly, Islam, which is submission, you being the slave of God, if you have a say, that's a contradiction with your slavery to God, your submission to God. Having a say contradicts that. So you either believe that you're a slave to God or you're a free man. Which one? You have to decide. And then after you decide that, everything basically becomes a little bit more logical.
That's a very explicit way to put the worldview, right? And like when you really talk about in terms of free versus slave, and we embrace that slavery to God because it's a benevolent form of slavery.
Oh, definitely. Submission, subjugation to the all-merciful. If you subjugate yourself to somebody who has evil tendencies, you are in a very bad shape. But if you subjugate yourself to the all-merciful, you're in a very great shape.
Just to clarify one thing before we move on to the next question. You began with explaining the difference between what democracy really includes in it and an aspect of democracy which is something that is included in many democracies, which is free elections, right? So free elections is, people have a say on who gets to rule over them, but in Islam, they don't have a say over what the law is. So can you disambiguate this in terms of what is a democracy? What is the difference between elections and humans having the say?
Well, any political system has two aspects, if we take it to the most simplistic form. Making the law and implementing and executing the law. Whereas in Islam, we say the one who makes the law is Allah, the one who executes the law are representatives, elected representatives of the Ummah. And that's why that aspect is totally fine. And it's not even democracy. Like, many systems of life. I mean, Islam is before democracy by at least 1,200 years, 1,100 years.
Well, people might say democracy comes from Athens, so they might say it's older than that.
Yeah, but Islam comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Sure.
So it's
I'm just saying
older
than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Exactly, the different sources. We don't need necessarily to basically prove that Islam came before anything else. We know exactly when Islam came, which is the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is in 610 CE, right? So, but it came from a different source. God didn't learn from the Greeks, right?
Yeah. Okay. So that just clarifies, the difference between electing a representative who rules according to like a constitution that comes from God and human beings making the constitution. And in America, you have both. You have both elected representatives who legislate from their own whims or, in theory, and we're going to get to this, in theory based on what their people want, and then also a constitution which is written by men, right? So another logical point that makes sense when I think about democracy or when one might think about democracy is that it opens up the question of how a country is to be run to everybody, right? It opens up that question. And wouldn't this, in theory, enable the best ideas to go to the top? However you believe the country should be run, maybe you think the law should come from God, maybe you think we should be communists. You can make the case for that to the people of the country. All the different ideas can be put on the table and we can decide. Isn't that reasonable?
To be honest, basically, this is not the first time that this question gets put on the table in itself, right? Like many Muslim modernists in America specifically, and also in Europe, but mostly in America, they are pushing for this theory. Just open everything let's open the society for anything and at least the legislation for everybody, and let Islam be one of the competitors within the political arena and let people vote. If people want Islam, they vote Islam. And this doesn't make sense. This is a contradiction. It's a contradiction of what Islam is. Islam either gets accepted by the majority, by the ruling elite of a country, and then the nation decides to be Islamic, or it doesn't, right? The minute basically you put Islam as one of many, this is the pure definition of shirk. Because you're saying, well, look, everything's acceptable. This man-made idea, this man-made idea, this man-made idea, and God's divine inspiration. They're all equal, so let's vote on them, right? And we have a majority for one of them, then we go with that and we move on. You're treating God's revelation just like any other man-made idea. This is shirk. Like this is shirk by definition, because you're allowing multiple sources of laws. So you can't have a nation that believes in Islam and believes in that at the same time. It's a contradiction. It's an oxymoron.
But wouldn't you think that if it is like whatever the best idea is, and we believe that it's Islam, that if it were set up like that, then Islam should win. All right? Like, if you've ever gone on, anybody who goes on like Stack Overflow or something to get a question answered on their programming bug or whatever, a bunch of people answer the question and then people vote for the best one. And usually that's the best one. The best one is the one that they call this the wisdom of the crowd, right? So can't we apply wisdom of the crowd to find the best legislative system? And if Islam is that, then it would become the outcome of such an election.
let's say theoretically, you have a nation that actually wants to choose how to live life. And they decided all together, and power is somehow magically, and it doesn't happen in real life, is shared amongst them, because power doesn't lie in everybody's pocket. There's people who have power, and then there's a minority who has power, and there's a majority that does not have any power.
Yeah.
It's not like as if it's evenly distributed. There's no, or forget unevenly distributed. There's no distribution. There's always concentration of power in the hands of the few. The rest, they don't have power. Any, none, zilch, null. There's a study that came out of Yale 10 plus years ago with 2 political science professors from there that proved statistically, after studying decades of legislative data in America and the elections that happened during those periods, conclude that the majority, the layman, the people, the citizen, the public, have statistically zero impact on policymaking. And the special interest groups have a loss of say, lots of correlation and say.
Yeah. I think they weighted by like cash, like, or how rich the people were. With the rich, there was a positive correlation. And with everybody, there was zero correlation.
Yeah, but not even rich individuals, special interest groups. It has to be,
because like rich individuals are going to correlate with special interest groups.
Yeah,
anyway.
exactly. Okay.
Yeah. So actually that takes me to the next question, which is like, so you mentioned it's shirk, right? But what is shirk about human beings deciphering and proposing what is the best system and choosing to live by that?
Because that's not submission to God. So you're either submitting or you're not submitting. You need to submit to God in everything in society, not just basically in the prayers and the rituals. And that's the definition of religion. Islam is not a religion. Islam is a system of life. It's a full human system of life. Political, economical, social, and spiritual. Not just spiritual. This is our problem. Our problem is we live in a liberal perspective, a secular perspective, that can plug in any type of religion that respects secularism and the limits that secularism put on religion. And that's how we live. That's not how Islam is. That's not what Allah wants from us. God does not want that from us. God wants us to submit fully for Him. And that's why, what is shirk? Shirk is basically submitting to others than God. So who sets the spiritual law? You know, a secular Muslim say God. But who sets the political and the economical and the social? You know, a secular Muslim, well, you know, we vote on that. That means basically human beings come and basically set the law. They propose the law, they vote on the law. As a majority, they agree on the law in the perfect situation. So that's why it is shirk. The minute we put Islam on the table with others, this is called shirk. And that's why in any society, and remember I was giving you the analogy, I was speaking about distribution of power. If people choose Islam, khalas, that's it. Then it's Islam and nothing else. If people basically say, no, look, we would love to basically have a say as a people, then that's not an Islamic society anymore. And nobody should put Islam as a candidate on the table. Islam should stay out of that. You know, individuals could basically still push for Islamic law to be there, Islamic, but understand that still the system,
that country, mechanism, that like outer mechanism is not Islamic.
It's an un-Islamic, shirky system.
I see. And I think a good analogy that might help people understand is like, we would never accept for like people to vote on should you worship a trinity or worship a unity, a one God. Yeah. And people say, okay, well, the people decided on Christianity, so okay, go to church. Right? That would be like, what the heck? This is wrong.
Yeah.
Right? But just like that, you know, we separate the politics and the law from our understanding of Tawheed, and it results in these kinds of wacky ideas. It takes me to my next question, which was like, looking at Western countries today, what kind of democracy even exists? Because I don't see how there could be no correlation if people are electing their congressmen, people are electing their president. Here in Canada, we have MPs. Don't elected representatives have to choose based on what their constituents want? And if not, then what's going wrong here? Like, why is democracy failing to live up to its promise?
3 things. Number 1, there's already a bias in the sample of candidates that come up to become nominees for elections. Okay, and that's basically who has enough money to campaign and run in the first place. So the people who have money, they'll select those on your behalf. And that means from the beginning, you have a very, very fine filtered, not just coarse filtered, fine filtered set of candidates. Now, okay, one might slip there, one might slip there. Let's say that. Let's say it's true. Fine. Then is a second bias. Second bias is the money spent by these special interest groups to defame these candidates that the rich do not want. So Here we go. Now you impact the public opinion. you impact the vote itself by basically manipulating and shaping people's minds and attitudes toward these candidates.
Interesting.
Okay, let's say basically that one here or there still slips after all that. But what do you do basically? Then you have a majority, you crush them with the majority and you make them negligible and you make their life a living hell, and then they just either fizzle out or they just stay there screaming. And by the way, it helps the oligarchs when you have one or two people screaming that have zero effect in a Congress, let's say, has 435 candidates, right? It's always good for the system to show, look, there are people who are screaming the people's opinions. We just need a little bit more vote. Let's wait till the next elections. You keep people waiting. You keep people hoping.
The hope up, yeah.
You keep the hope up. So that's also good. And the last but not least is after these candidates give all the different promises. There's another study. This one might be from Princeton. I can't remember, but 80-something% of the promises by all political candidates for a long period of time are just lies, right? And then that's 20% basically, they give some partial this, partial that, and add to that the earmarking that comes with it. So it's just after you get elected, khalas, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
You do what you want after.
Essentially, public opinion becomes one more variable. One more thing that people who have the media, who have the money, can influence to suit their interests.
The public opinion and the most important thing is the fine filtration at the beginning.
Not everybody can run, really.
No. Because you have the rich will always fund the candidates that they want to run. Imagine you have $10 million in your account, and then there's this dude who's not funded by the rich.
Yeah.
They barely can basically fundraise, let's say 100K, 200K. The battleground is not leveled.
Okay. Now, switching gears a little bit to the Islamic system, how is this not a problem for us either? Like, there's also going to be distribution of power. There's also going to be distribution of wealth. There's also going to be specific people who have the capability to run maybe for being the Khalifa or whatever office there is up for being for running. This kind of situation that you describe in a democratic system, which is not really democratic at all, how do we avoid those failure modes in Islam?
So number one, we give equal budgets to everybody in terms of expenditures. So if there's a rich man who doesn't need our budget, fine. We'll assign budgets for the candidates so we can enable them, right? Based upon their service and prior service, and it's a merit-based system. Number two, Islam only allows 3-day window for campaigning.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's just like people should already be known within the public sphere already.
Where does that 3-day window come from? Just briefly.
From Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu setting that window for the Sahaba to choose one of them as the next Khalifa, and setting a punishment that nobody resisted for the period.
Okay, so there's consensus on this. Like,
there's a consensus of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. Yes, correct. Yeah.
Okay. So essentially, like this 3-day period and having kind of equal budgets would ward off that kind of situation.
Yeah, but so don't forget, basically, like our election is just to execute the law. Because see, when you elect people to make the law is disaster, because the minute you make the law, you can change everything. But when the law is already set, you can't really change much. We just need to see your performance in the implementation. And a person who's not doing a good job, if he's really messing up real bad, there could be ground for impeachment, right? So,
basically the whole built-in legislation of Islam limits the damage that anybody can do, because if they do go off the reservation or they do start sucking, there's those immediate checks and balances.
Especially if they don't comply with the law. The minute they don't comply with the law, there's ground for impeachment, definitely.
Okay.
And the law is just from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so you're set up right, on the right foot.
Shifting gears back now to democracy. Sure, there's these kinds of manipulation tactics and filtrations. Isn't that better than just a straight up dictatorship then? Like, is it better than nothing?
You're comparing it to other dictatorships. You're not comparing it to Islam now, right?
No.
So Islam is now set on the side. We're comparing dictatorships with democracies. The thing is basically like, I wouldn't offer dictatorship to anybody. I would offer Islam to dictatorships, and I would offer Islam to democracies. But if you're going to compare democracies to dictatorships, it's the same thing. In economics, we have two concepts. We have a concept of a monopoly, and we have a concept, which is a very similar concept of even a duopoly or oligopoly. An oligopoly is basically a few members, like let's say 3 to 9 players in the market that dominate the whole market. Their impact is like a monopoly. A monopoly is one person. At the end of the day, the effect on the market is the same. At the end of the day, you have a set of players, whether 1 or 5 or 8, that dominates the market, and they crush everybody else. So tyranny and democracy are the same. Because at the end of the day, democracy is run by a few super rich people. The billionaires today coming together in any country, they coalesce, they collude, and they choose who to run and who's going to be in office.
And
so
in some
there's
ways
not much difference.
In some ways, it's worse because of the lie involved, the illusion.
Oh, definitely. Not just that. Look, at the end of the day, for example, is China a democracy or more of like a tyranny? Which one?
They call themselves republic.
Well, they call republic, but republic, and they do have elections within the party, because the Communist Party is millions of members.
Yeah,
it's
one
like
party
the country. Yeah, so it's like basically people get elected through it.
Mm-hmm.
So there is elections, but put it aside. Let's assume it's tyranny, right? Because most Americans, most Westerners will say China is definitely not a democracy. Fine, but which one is doing better? I think China. There's an amazing economy. There are lots of economic prosperity, there's advancements in technology, there's a great successes in the scientific and educational community, and look at their cities, they're so advanced. There's the quality of life in China is now bit by bit surpassing even the Scandinavian countries. Okay,
interesting.
Getting there, I'm not saying it did. I'm just saying basically that's why we're saying and then the democracies, their economy is going down, the quality of life is going down, the healthcare is going down, taxation is going up, unemployment is going up, the living cost is going up, right?
Yeah.
But in China, it's going the other way around. At the end of the day, from an Islamic perspective, we believe the right way, the right political system to live by, for human societies is the one that's sent by God, because that system is perfect. What's a perfect system? A perfect system is the one that basically will, at the end of the day, lead to economic prosperity, lead to a high quality of life, lead to the removal of illiteracy, the removal of poverty, the removing of homelessness, the removing of crime, the removing of drugs, and so forth, right?
Yeah.
So this is what we're talking about. We're talking about basically a system that will have healthcare and real markets, that there is competition with a level playing field between the different players in that sector, right? In Islam, we don't allow monopolies or oligopolies to happen. We believe in small business and medium business and maybe large enterprise, but not multinational conglomerates that come and crushes the sectors, right? We're not going to eliminate them, but the reason they exist in the capitalist world is not because there's geniuses, no, because there are lots of loopholes within the government that allows basically these big multinationals to be what they are through subsidies and loopholes for tax cuts and owning property that should be really public because it's naturally existing within the nation. And there's many different other really access to capital and interest and usury. There's many reasons that leads to concentration of wealth, that leads to trillionaires and multi-billionaire families. In Islam, we don't allow any of that. And that means people can really freely compete. We believe in real competition. No disruption from the state. This is what we believe in Islam. This is what God has said in the Quran. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, كَيْ لَا يَكُونَ دُولَةً بَيْنَ الْأَغْنِيَاءِ مِنْكُمْ. Meaning basically, so wealth does not become concentrated within the rich few in society.
The Marxists are going to love that one.
Well, but this is what it is in the Quran. It's 1400 years ago. You see what I'm saying? Like, we have the perfect system for humanity. It's from God.
Has the competition that capitalism offers, but also has wealth equality or wealth.
Definitely. The capitalism can't even compete with us. The whole idea of free market is just theory. It never will happen.
Interesting.
Why? Because there's people who are making laws. Those who make laws will have biases to their counterpart because they have human interest.
They weaponize the law for their own interests.
Definitely, is all the time. Like, any rational human will do that. That's the problem with humanity. The problem with humanity is you have these biases and interest that will always basically make you make a law that is not in the interest of the majority.
I think that on its own is a very compelling case for divine sovereignty.
But that's what it is.
That's what it is, yeah.
That's what it is.
So one more question, Sheikh. Just looking at the observable reality. There's this concept in international relations called democratic peace theory. And it's based on the observation that, historically speaking, democracies don't really go to war with each other. And there's a hypothesis that the reason why this is that because, in democracies, to go to war, you have to get the buy-in of your people. And when it comes to war, who bears the highest cost of war? It is the population, not the rulers. So in undemocratic countries, ones where the power is more concentrated at the top, or where there isn't that kind of electoral process, the leaders can decide to go to war based on their own interests, screw the populations. At least this is the explanation political scientists give. And I remember I took one political science course in undergrad, and the professor was very insistent that this is the most well-founded result in political science is democratic peace theory. Democracies lead to peace. What do you think about that?
Well, at least for the last 80 years, since World War II, right? 45 till 25, it's 80 years. Most of the wars that devastated the world are actually initiated by democracies. I mean, right now we see a genocide being executed by a democracy with a vast support from the public. So I don't know what that theory is all about, really, because it seems very biased. Democracies don't hurt democracies. Well, doesn't matter who you're hurting, doesn't matter who you're attacking.
Well, if we all became democracies, we wouldn't have any war anymore.
Okay, well, this is definitely basically, there's no data for that. There's no proofs for that. If what you define as democracies is your lifestyle imposed within an electoral system, what is democracy? Democracy is just basically people voting for what policy do they want.
Yeah.
Would you consider basically a nation that votes or decides to live by the law of God? Is that democracy? I mean, there's at the end of the day, people wanted to live by this system.
Yeah.
They elected to live by that system. It's not like there's angels sent by God to force that society. The society elected to live by that system.
That's a good point, because people confuse often. They use the word democracy. Really, they're talking about liberalism.
Liberalism, exactly.
Liberalism.
100% is secular liberalism.
So it is not democratic,
No.
because whenever Muslim countries do get to have the free vote, what do? They
Or the socialists.
Yeah, they vote for the Islamist candidates.
Yeah, 100%.
And they say, no, this is against democracy. Well, that's the only democracy the Middle East ever really knew.
Yeah.
Is when these candidates came to power.
And the Palestinian Authority had a free and fair elections that are overseen, I think, by even Carter, if I'm not mistaken, that led to Islamists to basically come to power. And now, what do you call that? Democracy or not democracy? Again, so the whole thing is biased, is very, very ideologically biased.
Yeah.
That being said, let's even go to the core conclusion of that study. We have basically the Peace of Westphalia congregated the Western and Central, let's say, North Europeans together, plus later basically the North Americans. And they decided to stay at peace together because together they have strength. The Peace of Westphalia is what set up, the stage for the international relations as we see it today, the world order. The world order configured until now due to the Peace of Westphalia.
But after Westphalia, you had both world wars, so it didn't really succeed, did it?
No, because they're saying it's between democracies. The world wars basically happened between what they might deem as fascist or non-democratic empires, right? So it's Germany versus and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, putting aside all the problems with the study, let's even basically tackle the core theme they're trying to prove. I'm saying these countries right now, there's no challenger. Their national interest and the interest of the rich people in it is aligned in exploiting the rest of the world. So there is an interest-based reason why they're aligned. Now we're seeing basically Europe and the United States are economically at each other's throats. So the minute basically that interest is lost, which is exploiting the rest of the world together, these democracies will start basically killing each other again, because they used to do it before that.
Yeah, and we even saw that like with the scramble for Africa, right? Like in the 1800s. I think that was around the same time as Westphalia.
Yeah.
They were fighting each other at the same time that they were raping the rest of the country.
France and Britain, and it will continue to be, right? Because Britain became democratic in 1688, right?
Yeah.
And a little bit later, France. And they still basically, like the Napoleonic Wars happened between who?
Between the European countries. But when the European countries were empires and they were colonizing, they did kind of have, we're all interested in raping the rest of the world's resources. They were fighting each other.
Yeah.
But now they're doing that and they're not fighting each other.
Yeah.
So what changed?
No, they aligned because now they got together and said, let's split the cake in a way where we don't have to fight each other, because fighting each other will hurt us. There's a common agreement. I'm saying the minute that changes and the cake is not good enough for everybody, it's not good enough for Trump. So now it's changing. So I'd like to see those who made this theory basically to talk about it in 5 to 10 years from today. It's already starting to crumble right now, this whole hypothesis. It's just gibberish, to be honest.
How much of it is due to just American hegemony? Like they're the ones who are just in charge, so they conquered the world.
Yeah. But see, how did the Americans get the rest of the democracies to agree? They came in, they said, look, it is in your interest it's in our all interest to stay together. And everybody gets a piece of the cake that they're happy with. So Belgium took, oh yeah, I like that piece of cake. It's great. Netherlands, they're small little tiny countries in Europe, basically, at the end of the day. They're happy with what the Americans give them. Now, the spoils of war, the exploitation is too little. The American says, look, man, this cake it's not enough for me. So you go get your own cake.
And I think
you see what I'm saying? Like this is changing. And you're gonna see these democracies bit by bit, they're gonna unravel. And this whole peace theory, it will also unravel. It's based upon assumptions. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it makes sense because there's conditions today that aren't going to last.
Oh, correct, exactly.
And that peace theory is based on kind of just like this little blip in history that's not really
that is correct.
Ideologically connected to democracy.
That is correct.
It makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah, so I'd like to add one more last point about the peace theory. Remember the study from Yale? People don't really have a say. So the assumption that people do have a say in terms of war and peace, this is ludicrous. We've seen basically George Bush waging war against Iraq and Afghanistan against the will of the whole world. Not just his people, the whole world. Although the Americans were in the streets, they don't want to go
That's a good point because even after that, consent was manufactured.
Exactly.
For the war.
Exactly. And people get manipulated, sadly, through the media and government agencies, and they believe what the government's saying due to security and keeping them secure. Yeah, that's the old new excuse that every empire and every tyrant in the world used to subdue its people.
All right, I think that's a great session about democracy. I definitely learned a few new things about democracy, and I hope our viewers benefited about the comparison about the democratic system with the Islamic one, about some of the features of democracy, some of the realities of democracy, which aren't really maybe as commonly spoken about. So we'll see you guys next time, inshallah, as we continue exploring these big ideas about civilizations, systems, philosophies on Rewired. Barakallah feek, Shaykh. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.